Well, welcome to the Aging Boomers. I'm your host, Frank Sampson. Of course, on our show, we discuss so many of the issues facing boomers, their parents, and what we know as an aging population. And I'm excited to talk to our guest today. But before I introduce her, I want to remind everybody that today's show is sponsored by Senior Care Authority, a professional senior placement and elder care management organization that has a national network of advisors to help in determining the right path for senior living and receiving proper care. So whether it's in-home care, assisted living, residential, or memory care, get the necessary advice from a senior care advisor in your area by calling Senior Care Authority at 888-809-1231, or you could go directly to the website at www.seniorcareauthority.com. And I just want to thank everybody for just tuning in and getting the word out. We're adding more and more people each and every day that are listening to our podcasts. So I want to thank you. Many of you have downloaded the free app on your iPhone or Android phone. And if you haven't, it's an easy way to do it. Just go into your apps and just type in Aging Boomers or The Aging Boomers, either one, and just download the free app, and you'll get updated all the time. But, of course, you could go to iTunes, you could go to iHeartRadio, Spreaker, or directly to our website, and which is agingboomers.com. So, again, thank you for all your support. We have with us today Susan Macaulay. Susan lived in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, that's a assisted living. I'm used to pronouncing it that way. But she was in Dubai for 18 years. She had a successful business as a public speaking coach and trainer. Like many people who care for loved ones with dementia, Susan was drafted into a role she never imagined she would be doing. She left what she loved behind to care for her mom, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. 4 years later, Susan is still getting on with it and taking great care of her mom. So, Susan, thank you for taking the time and sharing with us you and your mom's story. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Frank. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So, Susan, I know you have a blog that's getting a lot of people going to it and reading it. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read something that was on your blog, which is called My Alzheimer's Story. So I'm going to go ahead and read that, and I'd like to get your comments, okay?
Okay, great.
All right, great. So what you said on your blog, it says, I didn't want to be an Alzheimer's caregiver. I would have much rather continued my life as a businesswoman and entrepreneur residing in an exotic place on the other side of the world. I had no desire to come back to live in rural Canada and do something I felt eminently unqualified to do. My caregiving skills were non-existent. I'd never even had children to practice on. And what I knew about dementia in general and Alzheimer's disease in particular could have fit in a thimble. But my mother was sick. She wasn't getting the care I felt she needed and deserved, and I was compelled to make the decision I did. I dried my tears, said goodbye to Dubai, and got on with it. So, Susan, based on what you said on your blog, and knowing what you know now, would you have made that same decision back 4 or 5 years ago?
You know, Frank, I think I would. In fact, I think I would be even more likely to make the decision and be less frightened about it. I've experienced so much over the last 4 years, and while it's been extraordinarily difficult and at times almost broke me, I've experienced such healing and unconditional love, and I've learned so much, and I feel really privileged to have been able to accompany my mom on this part of her journey. So Yes, knowing now what I didn't know then, yeah,
Yeah.
I would have been even more likely and less afraid. I
Right.
was terrified at the time.
Yeah, you were getting into something that you just were not familiar with at all.
Yeah, and that's the case with a lot of people.
Right.
You know, so many people are as you said, drafted into this role that they have no idea about. If they had wanted to be caregivers, they would have chosen a profession that was related to that. You know, they would have been a nurse or a psychologist or a social worker, or and if you're not one of those, you really have no idea. And so people start caring for somebody sometimes out of obligation, often out of just sheer love for the person. And we do it with no skills whatsoever to begin with, and then you learn as you go.
Right. So let me ask, how's your mom doing?
Well, she's in a facility now. She's continues to decline. That's the nature of the disease, but it's not as I thought it was going to be. But when I started out, I thought, oh well, it's going to be this long, slow uh, journey into oblivion, and that's how we many people see Alzheimer's disease. But it's not really like that. It's more it's not as linear, and so we still have, I see her every day, and we still have lots of joyful activity, joyful time together, singing, rhyming, spelling. Although she doesn't sometimes doesn't remember me. Her language skills are really declining substantially now, but yeah, she's okay.
So when you came from Dubai and you came back, were you actually the caregiver for your mom? I know now you said she's in a memory care location that provide her with everyday care. But were you the caregiver at the very beginning?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
talk to us about that a little bit.
Well, I had never done anything like this before, and I didn't really know. I was going by instinct, and initially I was mostly on my own. I did have some support several days a week for a few hours in the afternoons, and then as time went on, I got more and more support. So by the end of the year, I had somebody coming in 5 days a week from 9 to 6, and I was with her in the evenings and on the weekends. But even at that, it's extremely difficult. There are all kinds of challenges. People will be able to identify with the repeating, constant questions. Mom would follow me around. People call this shadowing. She would have times where she was anxious and sometimes verbally aggressive, and I learned how to deal with all of those behaviors. But it would have benefited from training, or I really think that we need to have ways of giving caregivers, family caregivers, people who are non-professionals, the skills required to take care of their loved ones at home if that's what they choose to do. So I didn't have any of that. I looked online. I tried to find ways to learn what I needed to know, but it was really limited at the time. There's been a lot more people who have begun to supply training. In fact, one of the people that you interviewed recently, Mike Good,
Right.
has he has a website together in this, and he and I work together, collaborate to put on webinars that help people to better understand the disease and to learn how to communicate and to deal with some of the more problematic behaviors.
Yeah. No. I think, did you also do some training with Teepa Snow, or was that, yeah.
Yeah, she's
Yeah,
wonderful.
she's great. She's been on our show as well. Yeah.
Oh, she's fantastic. Yeah. Well, what happened was, as time has gone on, and I've gotten more interested in the disease and the people who have it, and how it evolves, and what we need to do as caregivers. I really wanted to give back in some way, to take my experience and give it more meaning, give it some purpose by learning how to help others to not make the same mistakes that I made, and to
Yeah.
have an easier time of it.
So those that are in a situation like you were at the beginning, all right, when you first came over, what suggestions do you have to those now? What have you learned over the past several years that you could give advice to other adult children or caregivers for their loved ones?
Well, I guess my first piece of advice would be to go online and to search out resources. And Tipa's videos are they're just wonderful. They're magic, and they really. She has a talent for communicating to people in a way that's non-threatening, and that is very practical and hands-on. And so that would be my number one recommendation, would be to watch her videos. There are many available for free for the watching on YouTube. And she also has videos available for purchase. Also, the second thing would be to reframe how you see the disease. And that is that rather than looking at it in terms of loss and in a way that takes away the personhood of the person that you're caring for, is to try to see it as a change in a way of looking at the world, or a change in the way the person is able to engage with the world and other people, and to work on helping them to live as well as they can with the disease until the end. So it's a question of really facilitating good living rather than focusing on what the person can't do anymore.
That's great advice. Great advice. So the disease itself, I mean, how do you see the disease today versus how you looked at it when you moved back from Dubai to take care of your mom?
Well, I thought it was going to be, horrible. I thought that she would, after a year or 18 months, she wouldn't remember who I was, and then I would put her in a facility, and she would be placed in a facility, and I would go somewhere else and restart my life. I saw it as being very linear, and people talk about the stages, the 4 stages or the 7 stages, and they're really focused on loss and capacity. But it doesn't happen like that. The stages aren't clear. It's not as linear as one would believe. There are still lots of moments of lucidity, and in fact, I believe that what I've come to observe with Mum is that it's almost like a peeling away of the layers of an onion, and that the core of the person, if you pay attention, is more revealed. And the things that are important, such as living in the moment, become central to life. So all of the things that we spend time worrying about disappear, and you get really very focused on what's happening right now. So I see it more now. I see it as an evolving, changing, transformational process moving towards the final chapter, death, which we all die eventually of something, and so I don't see it as such a tragedy as I did before. Of course, there are tragic aspects, but there are also many opportunities for growth and development and healing and joy and laughter and fun, and all of those things can, just like life is not a happy thing all the time. There are challenges and obstacles that we need to overcome, and so the same thing happens when you have a disease or when dementia is involved.
So share with us some of the joy that you've experienced through this process.
Well, one of the things is, I guess, a loss of, or a letting go of ego. Parent-child relationships are not always super easy. There can be challenges involved, and Mom and I are both fiercely independent people. She was a businesswoman. I was a businesswoman. We didn't always see eye to eye, and our relationship was good and strong, but there was inevitable friction and the way all relationships are. And what's happened is, as she has become more vulnerable, and I have taken on this caregiving role, I've been able to really let go of any resentments, any hard feelings I may have had. There's just really pure unconditional love left there. And so that's been a very joyful experience on a deep kind of spiritual and personal level. Right. On a kind of day-to-day level, I've learned all sorts of old songs that I never knew. She has a fabulous voice. I can't really carry a tune in a bucket. But I've learned to sing along.
Yeah, that's one of the, as you know, the company that I have, we help families in finding assisted living and memory care. And one of the placements we made, I'll never forget it. It was the mother and both the daughter and the son were. They were there when they were moving Mom into the place, and I was there too. And so the caregivers wanted to make sure they gave her a lot of attention and move in to help in the transition. They started playing some music and singing songs, and she started singing and had a beautiful voice, the mother, and the daughter started crying. And I said, "Why? It's wonderful you're crying," but she was crying hard. She goes, "I'd never heard my mom sing before."
No.
Never. And she just started crying. So when you were bringing that up, it just reminded me of that story, which was it was wonderful. I mean, it was a very happy and sad occasion all at the same time, So it's amazing what you learn. It's amazing what you learn about your loved one during a time like that.
That's right. Yeah. And singing is such a joyful activity, and how great for that woman. Right. And wow.
Yeah. So I did want to ask you. Everybody has different theories and philosophies about medications. Okay, especially medications as it relates to this particular type of disease, and different theories and all of that. What's been your experience with the use of medication and your mom's disease?
Well, this comes back to the skills and knowing how to engage and communicate with people who have dementia. And when I first came back, I really didn't have those skills. I went and Mom was up a lot in the night, and I went to the doctor to see what could be, how we could be helped, because I was not sleeping and she was not sleeping, and it wasn't good. So she was given low doses of antipsychotic medication, And what I found since then is that people, because we don't know how to deal with our loved ones with dementia in a positive way and approach them in a way that helps them to reduce anxiety and stress, is that often they're medicated to deal with behaviors that could be managed in other ways. As you probably know from having spoken with Tipa, this is one of her areas that she really is keen to get across to people, is that if we manage our own behavior differently, then the people with dementia will they will behave differently. They will respond to our behavior in a more positive way, and then drugs won't be necessary. So my view, I've become a kind of an anti-psychotic advocate over the years, and I really feel strongly that people should not be medicated with antipsychotic drugs, and that that they should be used only as a last resort when all other avenues have been tried.
Yeah, I think that I have seen when families get more involved with their parents or other loved one, that and they understand the disease and understand how to react to certain situations, that sometimes the medications aren't necessary. But every situation is different, of course.
Yes, every situation is different. That's true. But we see behaviors that in normal people, and I use that term right. In quotation marks, things that we do as with having all our faculties, things like going for a walk. Things like, that if you have Alzheimer's disease and you decide to go out for a walk one day and you get lost, then you're wandering. And so we put labels on behaviors that would otherwise be considered normal. If somebody gets in an argument, or for example, resist care is another one, that if somebody came to you, got you into your room in the morning and said, Frank, time to get up, and oh, by the way, I'm going to undress you and give you a shower and wash your private parts, and what would you say? How would you react?
Probably not too favorably.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And we're taught to resist people invading our private space. And yet, when you have dementia, if you do that, it's considered problematic. You're given the label of being hard to get along with. So I think we need to change our understanding of where these behaviors come from, and modify our own way of dealing with them to reduce the likelihood of generating the kind of problems that really, they in my opinion, they often come from the way that care is delivered, rather than from the way that from the disease itself. And I know that from personal experience. I by changing my own behavior, I've been able to change behaviors in my mom.
Mm-hmm. So, when you kind of got going with this and helping your mom, and throughout the whole process, did you, what was your experience on support from others, whether they be those in the medical profession or family members? Maybe you met those that are in the senior care industry, or specialists, or geriatric care managers. What kind of support did you receive, or did you feel kind of totally alone?
Well, there's a lot of conflict in my family around my mom's care, as you may have, I'm sure you've experienced, in fact,
sure. Right.
In the work that you do.
Yep.
people don't necessarily agree on how mom, dad, or their other loved ones should be dealt with, and that's the case in my situation. So that's certainly made it more challenging. In terms of community support, I think that there's I think a lot more training and education is required, even in the social work community, in the medical community. We're still in a kind of a novice stage with respect to how to deal with this disease and the people who have it. It's evolving. It needs to evolve at a very fast pace, because things are, so many people are going to have this disease. I think we really need to change the frameworks and to discover new ways of educating the people that need to be educated, so that we can care for people in a more dignified and supportive way. So yeah, I could have used a lot more support, and that's why I'm keen to try to help other people. That's why I went to the training with TIPA. That's why I have run this blog. That's why I do webinars. All of those things are my effort or my contribution, so that other people don't have to suffer in some of the ways that I have and my mom has.
I mean, this has been enlightening. We're unfortunately out of time, but before we sign off here, share with everybody a little bit about your blog and how they could get to the blog and read more and learn more.
Well, the blog is myalzheimersstory.com, and it's really very simple to get to. You just need to type that into the navigation, whatever browser search engine you're using. And I've got, the blog is relatively young, actually. It's only about 18 months old, and but already there are a couple of hundred articles on it, some of them personal. I also write poetry. There are videos. There are different kind of questions and tools that people can use to improve their own experience with whatever journey they're on with respect to the disease. So it's myalzheimersstory.com. And everybody's welcome.
Great. Well, Susan, thank you so much for joining us. Susan Macaulay, check it out, myalzheimersstory.com. And Susan, best to you and your mom and, your journey together. So, and thanks for taking the time to join us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, and thanks to all of you for joining in. Again, share this podcast and others with family and friends, and just be safe out there, and we'll talk to you all soon.